There it is. Hi. Oh my God, all of these things in my panel are so interesting. I have so many questions for them. But anyway, so here's mine. Interpreting the fictional past, how fans of the Elder Scrolls deal with the Battle of Red Mountain. So over the past year or something, I've been spending a lot of time in archives and libraries, but the ones that you find on the internet, which are about the Elder Scrolls, where fans take sort of narrative information and put them in Wikipedia-like articles, or gather the books from that you can find in the game, and just basically transcribe them and post them as pages. And I'm very much interested in sort of how these platforms, these archives themselves, structure the way the fans talk about this world that they are such a fan of. And I'm going to talk about one particular text which was written by a fan. It's sort of a mix between fan fiction and role-playing and fan scholarship, a phenomenon which I like to call archontic fandom. And see how that sort of works, how this fan theory became dominant in the fandom. So first, a bit of incomprehensible lore to anyone who hasn't actually played the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, especially the quote that I've highlighted here. Nerevar summoned Azura again, and she showed them how to use the tools to separate the power of the heart from the Dwemer people. And on the fields, the tribunal and their armies watched as the Dwemer turned into dust all around them, as their stolen immortality was taken away. Yeah, so this is one account from a book called Nerevar at Red Mountain, which is an account of a battle that took place thousands of years before the actual events of the game. It was a great war between two elven clans, the Khmer and the Dwemer, and during that battle, one of the clans, the Dwemer, just suddenly disappeared, vanished into thin air, and nobody really knows why. As was mentioned during the first presentation, everything in the Elder Scrolls history is presented as subjective. There is no sort of conclusive encyclopedia that tells us this is what definitely happened. So within the game, there are multiple different accounts to be found that really strongly contradict this particular version of history. So there's one where the tribunal, which is sort of like a trio of demigods which serve as protectors of the land, they are made to be responsible for just making these Dwemer disappear. There's a sort of apocryphal account of dissident priests, which says that nobody but the Dwemer themselves had anything to do with this disappearance at all. But who knows the truth? What really happened to the Dwemer? This is a question that I'm not asking for the first time, and this is a question that fans have been posing ever since the game came out. Obviously, if there's a gap in the knowledge, then one must find out what it actually is. So this has been going on for, well, I mean, the discussions are still actually going on. There are still questions popping up on the lore forums of fans who just played Morrowind for the first time and want to know what the hell happened. And one of the places where this happens is a website called the Imperial Library. This is why I said I spend a lot of time in libraries. It's just this one, right? It's very nice because the library is kind of like this sort of prototypical archive, right? This is what we think of when we think of an archive. We think of shelves full of books and documents, and this is precisely that, except it's hyperlinks, basically. So I call this a fan-made paratextual archive. And I want to sort of, for now, emphasize the fan-made archive part. So I see this website and other websites like it, like the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages and the Elder Scrolls Wikia on the fandom platform, mainly as a sort of a narrative database, as a database where fans gather, archive, and catalog narrative information. So this is sort of a cross between database, as Lev Manovich put it, as just a structured collection of data, which is to be organized for a fast retrieval by a computer, and archive, as Jacques Derrida put it, which is sort of I mean, I can't really go ahead and quote him here extensively because that would take too long, but it's sort of a mix between a literal institution and sort of a metaphorical idea, right, of a place where things are gathered, to be very, very essentialist about it. And Derrida talked about the archive in terms of power relations and how the archive, when we store things in the archive, when we make things prominent in the archive, we are also simultaneously sort of excluding a lot. This was really his thing, of course, like, oh, if you're doing one thing, then you're also doing the opposite thing at the same time. So that's kind of what happens in these archives as well, you know, like when certain things are stored in these websites, that could mean that other things are found to be unworthy of being remembered by anyone, the people who visit the archives. So what happens in these on these websites is something that I call archontic fandom, like I referred to earlier. It's a term I take from Matt Hill's. There's a little bit of more history to it, but basically this is based on Derrida's archontic principle, which is a principle of gathering together, of consignation, as he called it. And it's basically the principle by which the guardians of the archive sort of justified their position, right? So by the archontic principle, these people are allowed to maintain this archive and to derive some sort of power from it. So archontic fandom then is basically the fanish practice of studying, gathering, archiving, collecting material from the Elder Scrolls, from the games, but also from sort of official texts that surround it, like the 2 books that were based on the series, in order to get a greater understanding of the narrative universe of the Elder Scrolls, which is really necessary because, man, is that stuff dense. Yeah, seriously, try to read Vivek's 36 lessons. It takes you a whole day and you won't understand 10% of it. So how do this sort of fan scholarship that we see here and power relations intersect? Because, you know, fans, they're all supposed to be really nice to each other and everything. If you listen to Henry Jenkins, you'll get the idea that this is a really nice, flat community, but most of these studies have maybe sort of not emphasized the hierarchies that come into existence enough. So on that note, I want to talk about this 5,000-word letter, report, treatise called The Final Report to Trebonius. It was written by a fan named Luagar, and it was published in 2006, I think, if I'm not mistaken, if the Wayback Machine hasn't lied to me. And this is one of the most prominent pieces written about the disappearance of the Dwemer during the Battle of Red Mountain. As this fan here says, it's basically the final word. There might be some details left to sort out, but I don't think anybody is seriously still contesting it. So to very basically sort of summarize the thesis of this thing, if I can make things even more complicated, basically the writer agrees with these sort of more dissident accounts that the Dwemer made themselves disappear, that they had built a big automaton with a enchanted skin on top, like strapped to it, and during the battle, this the engine of this automaton was the heart was activated, and all of the Dwemer were sucked into the divine skin, and all of their souls were stored there. Yeah, it's great. We don't really know if it went well for them, but you know, this is the idea of what happened. So, like I said, this theory has become quite dominant among fans. So, if you go to recent forum discussions about this, you'll see someone posting a thread going, "Hey, what happened to the Dwemer? Where did they go? I don't really understand." And there's all these different accounts, and someone will just go, "Read this piece," and you'll get it. Even though this is fan theory, this is not supposed to be canon or anything. So, you know, why is it so? Why are there not so many other perspectives being emphasized? In fact, most of the threads that I've found over the year that I've been roaming around these places, I've never really found anyone really refer to any other theory as being true in any sort of sense. They mostly refer to it as, like I said here, heterodoxy. So what makes this so dominant? And specifically, what does the archive itself do to make this theory so dominant? So first of all, this was posted onto a section of the website called the Forum Scholars Guild. Thank you. Where it was accepted because it adheres to what the library calls simple guidelines, which basically means that it's supposed to be written in a sort of an academic, encyclopedic tone. It's not supposed to include any sort of speculation. It's just supposed to state the facts and then derive some sort of thesis from that. In addition, and this is quite important, it is cataloged on the main website as well, alongside all of the more official texts, so alongside books that you can find in-game and alongside the official articles written by the librarians themselves, which just synthesize information found in-game as well. And it includes, you can see them very tinily in the up there, 3 tags. I'm not entirely sure what they are, but if you search the library for any one of these tags, you will find this particular text much sooner than any other text. So there is sort of it's just easier to find basically, and it's in a more implicitly prestigious section of the website. But it's not entirely uncontested. There is still sort of a resistance, so as the quotes I've put up here kind of demonstrate, and especially the first one is quite telling. I've tried looking for the official stamp of approval on this, but all I can find are forum posts, nothing reliable. And everything I do find in these forum posts are references back to the Imperial Library. So it's just sort of like it's sort of locked in a cycle, right? And this is not like evil or anything or intentionally exclusive. It's just sort of like this is kind of how just the system of this website works. Then there are some other examples of contestation, and there is even one thread where someone points out that the author of the original text misuses a source. Which, you know, if someone were to do that in I don't know, academic peer review or something, that would be, you know, something like a fairly big deal if it's a really serious thing. But then one of the guardians of the archive, one of the librarians, comes in, who has been witnessing this discussion going on for about well, this must be 11 years by now, and says, well, this is getting a bit tiresome. And can't we just accept that this is the best theory out there? Can't we just sort of accept that this is the one that makes the most sense and that accounts for all the right things? And, well, does this sort of performance of expertise resolve the debate? Yeah, it does, actually. The critic in question just says, well, yeah, you have superior knowledge, clearly, because you are the librarian. So I guess my criticism was a little precipitated, is what they literally said. And actually, the author of the original text also comes into this thread and says, oh, I'll change that to make it right, so that the text is still, you know, up to the highest standard. And fun fact, he didn't actually do it until I pointed it out. That this was something he was supposed to be doing. So 4 years later, I finally made that happen. So sort of my conclusion is that fandom is not free of hierarchy, and that this is quite an important realization, because fan studies tends to be quite celebratory of the way that people engage with their games. And I'm not saying that, like I said, this community is not evil. The power hierarchy is not evil, but just that fandom is not separate from possible power relation constructions. So yes, that's sort of it. I have some pages cited from the website, and yeah, thank you.
Important insights right there. I see you requesting the cube, so you get to.
Thanks. That was actually really interesting. I don't know if you've played Bloodborne.
What?
Bloodborne.
I haven't,
Software.
unfortunately.
From just like in Dark Souls, those games are pretty known for hiding their lore in items and in descriptions and in some things happening. There's actually a piece written by Redgrave, which is like, I think 200 pages long, pure fan fiction. But it all came mostly from items and from descriptions in the game. What does this use as a source?
This particular text uses a variety of things, so it's mostly books found in-game, but also some texts which were written by developers and posted online afterwards, and also some articles from the Imperial Library itself. For example, one interview with a selection of in-game characters, which was then sort of like rewritten into as if they were all three in the same room.
That's awesome.
Yeah, which is I really like that. I still really like it. Like I'm skeptical, but I really like it.
No archaeology though.
Cool. Thanks.